doesn't. Next, I'd like to request Yasser for Sozo Salam. But Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
صلوات. کہتی تھی ماں خوب میاں چل بات کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر آرمان تھا پہناوی پوشاک شاہانی افسوس کے راسائن تجھو کوئی جوانی کیسا تھا مقدر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر کہتی تھی ماں خوب بڑی میاں چل بات کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر اتنا تو ذرا تہرتن ہے دولہا بنا لوں بس ایک جھلک سحر کی سغرا کو دکھا لوں بے شانتی قہر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر کہتی تھی ماں خوب بڑی میاں چل بات کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر آتار برس پالک پر ون چڑھایا وہ کیس والا ہے میرا خون میں نہایا یہ کیا ہوا دل پر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر کہتی تھی ماں خوب بڑی میاں چل بات کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ماں تیری جدائی میں بلکہ سی جلے گی ماں چاہیے کہ سغرا کو خبر تیری سنے کی اب کیا کروں جیت کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر کہتی تھی ماں خوب بڑی میاں چل بات کر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر ہائے ہائے علی اکبر صلوات.
Nice job, Yasser. Next, I'd like to welcome Jawad Naqvi. He's going to recite a source for us.
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم یہ شور گریا یہ شور ماتم سنے ہوئے داستان پہ ہم ایک آہ بن کر ابھر رہی ہے وہ کربلا کی صدائے پرنم صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم جو ظلم و ستم کے جوخ سوال یہ تھا کہ کون روکے حسین و ابن علی کی در پر جمی ہوئی تھی نہائے عالم سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم اصول و فکر و عمل کو مورا یزیدیت کے پسو کو توڑا ہر ایک دیوار ظلم ادا کر بنا گیا دین کے قصر موقم سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم سدا رہے گا حسین کا غم سوات
Jawad, nice job. Next, I'd like to welcome Faris. Please come up and recite.
محمد وعلى محمد صلوات. جانے والوں در عباس پہ جب تم جانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. جانے والوں در عباس پہ جب تم جانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. سب سے پہلے انہیں کہنا میری جانب سے سلام پھر یہ کہنا کہ تڑپتا ہے وطن میں وہ غلام پھر یہ کہنا کہ تڑپتا ہے وطن میں وہ غلام. کچھ نہیں لانا فقط اذن زیارت لانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. جانے والوں در عباس پہ جب تم جانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. کہنا ہاشم کی قمر سے یہ کریں اور کرم دیکھنے ہیں مجھے روزوں کے بدلتے پرچم دیکھنے ہیں مجھے روزوں کے بدلتے پرچم. اس برس ماہ ازا مجھ کو وہیں دکھلانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. کہنا حضرت سے وسائل کو کشادہ کر دے میرا اس سال ذرا رزق زیادہ کر دیں. بیٹیوں بیٹوں کو بیٹیوں بیٹوں کو ہمراہ مجھے لانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. چھوٹے حضرت سے یہ کہنا کہ ہے عاشور قریب یہ بھی کہنا کہ کیا اس سال بھی تڑپے گا غریب. خون کا دینا ہے وقت آ کے مجھے نظر آنا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. جانے والوں در عباس پہ جب تم جانا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. کیسے زندہ رہی بن آپ کی اصغر کی بہن مر گئی پر نہ کھلی بچی کی گردن سے رسن مر گئی پر نہ کھلی بچی کی گردن سے رسن. پرسہ معصوم سکینہ کا ہے دینے آنا یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. جانے والوں دریا باس پہ جب تم جانا، یہ عریضہ میرے مولا کو سنا کر آنا. صلوات.
Thank you, Faris. Beautiful recitation. Next, I'd like to welcome Brother Ayan. Come up and do the recitation.
صلوات. یہ ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ، یہ ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. تمہارا دوست ہے تنہا، تمہارا دوست ہے تنہا، حبیب آ جاؤ. یہ ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. شہید کیسے ہوا وہ بتاؤ گے آ کر، تم حال مسلم میں بے کس سناؤ گے آ کر. رقیہ تک تھی ہے رستا، رقیہ تک تھی ہے رستا، حبیب آ جاؤ. ایک ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. بتا رہا تھا اسے کوئی بھی نہیں ہے میرا، تو بولی ثانی ذرا حبیب آئے گا. ہے اس کو تم پہ بھروسہ، ہے اس کو تم پہ بھروسہ، حبیب آ جاؤ. ایک ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. وہ جب یہ سنتی ہے کوفے سے آ رہے ہیں شکی، تو پوچھتی ہے ہمارا بھی آئے گا کوئی. دعائیں دے گی سکینہ، دعائیں دے گی سکینہ، حبیب آ جاؤ. یہ ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. در بطول دوبارہ جلایا جائے گا، تمہارا دوست پہ خنجر چلایا جائے گا. نہیں ہے وقت زیادہ، نہیں ہے وقت زیادہ، حبیب آ جاؤ. یہ ختم شاہ نے لکھا حبیب آ جاؤ. صلوات.
MashaAllah, nice job. All right, before I welcome Dr. Shabbir Karmali to the member, everyone please recite Surah Fatiha for tonight's sponsors. All right, loud Nare Hadri. Ali. All right, I'd like to welcome Dr. Shabbir Karmali to the member.
فاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in Boston or across the globe, wherever you may be hearing my voice, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question, what's the importance of knowledge? We've been talking about the future of our community in light of the Husseini movement and the message of Imam Hussein, the civilization that Imam Hussein envisioned, based on understanding and reviving the spirit of Islam, the spirit of excellence, the spirit of action, the spirit of ability to do things for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And last night we discussed some categories of knowledge, and the take-home message that I want us to remember was there are two domains, that everything does not require and everything is not a one-size-fits-all solution. The same way that you need different tools in your set, depending on what your task and your goal is, the same way we have different tools that Allah has given us. Have you ever played golf? And in golf, you'll have, for example, for those who've had, you'll have an iron or a wood, for example, and that's not the same thing that you're going to use for example, for putting. That's a different thing that you're going to be using. Similarly, if you're a physician or you're a surgeon, for example, there's certain tools that you may be using. Maybe you're using, a scalpel or something else, or maybe you're not even using that. Maybe you're controlling a robot in order to conduct a surgery. So there's different tools in your kit, but those are tools. Similarly, we sometimes think that the only tool that we have to use is aql, although that's vital, and we'll talk about that tonight. But there's also ishq. And one may say, why did we talk about aql and ishq, and then why did we talk about parents? Why do we talk about marriage? Why do we talk about respect of women, respect of men? Why? And the reality was that the argument that I was trying to get us to understand was sometimes you need aql and sometimes you need ishq, and sometimes you need both. And sometimes with our loved ones, we need more ishq than aql. And when I talk about ishq, it's the Farsi ishq, not the Urdu one, for example. It's the divine love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're referring to. There's a difference. And so what I'm driving at is that manifestation of our love of Allah should become our understanding that I love my parents and I respect my parents because of that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are a tajalli, they are a flash of the love of Allah on earth. Similarly, in Islam, marriage is a spiritual act, that husband and wife are to get together. Why? With the niyyah of qurbatan ilallah. We should both be taking ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should be closely making ourselves go closer as husband and wife to Jannat, not Jahannam. I remember when I first started lecturing, when I was young, really young, I was in college or like high school, like first year of college. And when I was lecturing, this brother, he came up to me and I said, why should you get married? And I had different views, we all develop, right? We should develop. And so I said, if nothing else, as a man, if you get married, you are more likely to live longer statistically. Statistically, married people live longer. Remember, so I'll tell you something. When you get married as a man, it's not that you live longer. I said, I have this not married, you live longer as a man. It's not that you live longer, it feels longer. I said, I have to ask your wife's opinion on this. She may have something to say about it as well. And so there's perception and there's reality. Having said that, when it comes to this, the idea was sometimes you need to be affectionate and loving. The other aspect of aql and ishq is, aql inspires us to act. So for example, have you studied this? This has been studied and this has been documented in Islamic philosophy as well as Western philosophy. In Western philosophy, they call it Beardan's mule. You may have heard of this. Have you heard of this? So Beardan's mule is this like concept, and others, Avicenna and others have used different examples. Mullah Sadra and others have used other examples. In the Eastern example, they use the example of maybe two dates that are equidistant from a mule. In the Western world, they use food and drink, food and water, and a mule is equally hungry and equally thirsty. So knowing that is important because there's no superiority of the water over the food in this situation. They need both to survive. And then the assumption is, what if the mule is 100% purely logical? And it has equidistant, exact same distance from where it is. It has food and it has water, and it's equally hungry and equally thirsty, and is a 100% logical entity. And it needs to eat or drink to survive. What will this mule do? What will it do? Will it go to the water or the food first? If it's a purely rational being, it will glitch like a computer. It'll die. Because it can't decipher where to go. Because they're exactly equal distance. It doesn't know what's better. It'll throw a loop, an infinite loop. It'll glitch. Like, how your computers glitch? It will glitch. But if there's one instance where somebody sees that mule and it's struggling, it's not able to decide which way to go, if you just bump it or push it or nudge it in one direction, that may be ishq, tough love for its betterment, it may be able to survive. Similarly, in our world, in our life, things may be purely logical, and there may be things that are purely require a little bit of tact, a little bit of different way. So now, having said that, everything is not only aql, but it's vital, and that's what we'll come to tonight. Having said that, the future of our community, one element of what we need to understand is a problem, which I'll lay out for you, and inshallah we'll build on this. The take-home message tonight should be the importance and the vitality and the vital nature of knowledge, but also that may have its limitations as well. Tools and vehicles for us to reach the divine, to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now, having said that, let's come back to this. And I'm going to promise that I try to keep this tight tonight. Having said that, I wasn't with you the first couple of nights. So in my mind, I'm trying to make sure that I give maximum evidence. I keep in mind that I also know that, it's raining and all of these things. But remember, even these nights, and I told you this last night, it doesn't make sense sometimes. But it's that love that brings you. It's that ishq that brings you. Logically, you would say, I can live stream at home, but it's not the same. The concept of your loved one. When we mourn for Imam Hussein, it's like mourning for a loved one, right? And that concept is very important. In fact, if you don't think about this, then you may miss out on this thing. Then that's what drives you here. I'll share this in a line of poetry that a poet just said. It was raining, and for those online, it's raining here in Boston. And it was raining in a Jashan in Pakistan one day. It was 13th of Rajab. And the poet said, तुमको लगता था कि बारिश है, ये क्यों कर आएंगे? जिनको लगता था, तुमको लगता था कि बारिश है, ये क्यों कर आएंगे? तुमको लगता था कि बारिश है, ये क्यों कर आएंगे? अली जरयून का, तुमको लगता था कि बारिश है, ये क्यों कर आएंगे? हम अली के नाम पर, हम हुसैन के नाम पर, हम अली के नाम पर, हम हुसैन के नाम पर, तुमको लगता था कि बारिश है, ये क्यों कर आएंगे? हम अली के नाम पर कब्रों से उठकर आएंगे. That love of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that love of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that love is what brings us here year after year. Logic would keep us at home. Logic would say, I'll do it next year. Logic would say, don't worry about it. But that alignment of father and son, that alignment of Ali and Hussein, that alignment of Rasulullah, Ali and Hussein keeps us coming back year after year. Despite the odds, rain or shine, sleet or snow, it doesn't matter, we will come. Because it's the concept of he gave us a burning meaning for life. He revived the meaning of life for us. Where Islam was going off the rails, he said, I need to awaken the conscience of people. So this Ali and Hussein are inscribed on our hearts from childhood. And that love has kept us going after year. Ruh-e-azan hai baap, to beta namaz-e-deen. Masjid Ali ki hai, to musalla Hussein ka. Masjid Ali ki hai, to musalla Hussein ka. Jagir-e-kibriya hui taqseem is tarha. Jagir-e-kibriya hui taqseem is tarha. काबा अली का अर्श मुअल्ला हुसैन का जागीर किब्रिया हुई तकसीम इस तरह काबा अली का अर्श मुअल्ला हुसैन का. The estate of God was divided in this way. The house of God became Ali's and the arsh became Hussein's. There's either the arsh mu'alla, the throne of God. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the greatest creation that God has made in terms of magnanimity is the throne, the arsh. Arsh of Allah is mu'alla or Karbala is mu'alla. And you'll find that in this there's a lot of depth. Allow me and forgive me when I'm saying this, I'm using some languages that some of you are Saudis know, but there's a depth. The issue sometimes people say is English, Urdu, this language, that, but that's not the issue. The issue is the substance relative and relatable to the audience that's understanding this? That's the issue. If someone only spoke Japanese, but they knew what we're going through as Husseinis in 2025 in Boston, that's better. Get them to translate, that's even better. Then someone who's not aware and doesn't have a pulse on society, who doesn't have a pulse of what's going on, a pulse of what my problems are, what your problems are, what we're facing on a day-to-day. That love, the most valuable asset that you have in your life is not your bank balance, it's not your home, it's not all of those things, although they're important. The most valuable thing that you have is the love of the Ahlul Bayt. And I don't say that as hyperbole. I say that because that should be the spring of all the good that you do in your life, that inspires you to do things that are impossible. You know, sometimes I've been speaking English. I hope people don't misunderstand. I'm speaking here, but I'm also speaking online. There's different audiences that I'm catering to. There's the audience here. There's an audience online. There's an audience that doesn't even exist. I don't even know it exists, but through social media and online, in 5 years, 10 years, they may listen. So there are different audiences that I'm catering to. One thing that I should make clear, this is not a kids majlis. I don't expect anyone under 16 to understand what I'm saying. Just because it's in English doesn't mean that it's a kids majlis. It's very important to get that right. I grew up in this environment where people said, "Bachon ki majlis hai, English mein ho rahi hai." And the reality is, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I thought till I was maybe 9 or 10, I thought Imam Hussein spoke Urdu at home. He didn't. They knew Urdu, they knew Hindi, and they know Sindhi. There's a riwayat that the Ahlul Bayt knew these languages. Imam Raza spoke in different languages, including Sindhi and others. But they spoke often Arabic at home. That's the language that they spoke. And that was a different dialect than we even use today, a different form. So what that means is there's a struggle that one has to go through in order to get to where they get to. If you're someone who's from the subcontinent, or maybe you're from a background, many people were not indigenous to the subcontinent. People came from the Arab belt, they came from Persia, they came from the Caucasus, and they came from Turkey and many other places, and they ended up in what is called the Indian subcontinent, the greater Indian subcontinent. When they were reciting majalises at that time, they were perhaps in Arabic. And then when they shifted then to Farsi after that. And then they shifted to Urdu after that. And now it's shifting into English. But English is old news, it's shifting into Spanish now. You're behind the curve if you're just focused on English. And by the way, when it was shifting from Arabic to Farsi, those generations ago, unke dil pe bhi chhuriyan chalti hongi. They were probably like, Arabic? Do you know how the Arabs had divided the world? There was Arab and Ajam. You know what Arab means? Do you know what Ajam means? Arab means one who speaks Arabic. Do you know what Ajam means? Ajam literally means everything else. which was Farsi. It literally meant someone who's mute. That's how much pride they had in their language. If you knew, Ahle Zaban, if you knew Arabic, you could speak. You know how to talk. You knew how to communicate. You are human. But if you didn't know Arabic, you were subhuman. So then it went to Farsi. And Farsi is the language of Rumi, Hafiz. It's a magnificent, beautiful language. And up until 100 years ago, it was the judicial court language in India for the longest time. But if you know biology, you know, if nothing else, that evolution is part of the domain. Adaptability is part of the domain. And the principles are what matter. So now, coming to this, the take-home message is you have to know how to balance love and ishq. You may realize that something is very intellectually stimulating and important, but it may not push you to act. The ishq is what pushes you to act. So if you see poverty, if you see hunger, if you see something in society, that love of Imam Hussein that you may have may say to you, I can't tolerate that Imam Hussein went and he left the world and was martyred in thirst. I won't let anyone else go thirsty. It motivates, it sparks. And that's not my words. The Ahlul Bayt have told us, إِنَّ لِقَتْلِ الْحُسَيْنِ حَرَارَةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَا تَبْرُدْ أَبَدًا. Verily, for the tragedy of Hussein, there is a fire that burns in the heart of the believers, and it never extinguishes. That fire is vital. So now, on this basis of understanding this, when I grew up listening to Majlis, it was very important. Many people ask me, why did I get into this space? It was a need, it was a necessity. And I said, I'm going to do something about it within my capability. Recall the story of Ibrahim, when Ibrahim is being thrown towards the fire. There's a narration that when he's being thrown towards the fire, right? We said that last night. When he's being thrown, Jibreel comes and says, look, what do you need? Do you need help? He says, not from you. I need help, but not from you. But there's another narration that says there was a little bird that when he was being thrown towards the fire, the bird was taking a little bit of water and flicking it towards the fire. And everyone was saying, what are you doing? This fire is days. The fires that happen in California and like the ones that take days to go out, the ones that you need so many resources and abilities that they sometimes rage on, that type of fire is there. And he's flicking a little drops of water wherever he can. They said, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. He said, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to do what I can do. He said, why? They said, why? Why are you wasting your time? This little bird. And he says, I won't be asked if I put out the fire. I'll be asked, what did I do in my ability to reduce the fire? To do something for Ibrahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's beautiful about Allah, if you read the Quran, Allah asks only two things from us. One is niyyah, one is intent, sincerity, good intent, and the other is action. That's it. Allah does not ask us for the result. The result is in Allah's hands. What is on us is intent and maximum effort. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes it from there. And He may open doors for you that you never thought possible. Believe me, I've seen this, and I've met countless people who have lived this. You must have lived this. So now comes this example. Now, growing up in this environment, so do action. So now, similarly, what is it that we can do? Knowledge. One of the challenges that we face, and many people face today, is why are we losing people? It's very interesting. You may find that when you talk to people in our communities, on the local level, wherever you go, from here to California, from London to Paris to Canada to Australia, whatever you name it, everyone's going through a similar thing. In our communities, you find that sometimes people are concerned about one big question. I've met with leaders from our community at conferences, and the biggest issue that they have and the biggest concern that they all have is the same: youth participation. Will there be anyone here in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And we talked about some of the things about why that may or may not be. Remember? We said if your kid asks you and says, Baba, Mama, I would be a Maulana, are you going to say, MashaAllah or La? Hawla wala, right? Most people know the answer. That tells you the dynamics. There was a time when the person sitting on the mimbar was truly the most educated person in town. There was a time. And literally they were speaking to people who were not as educated as they were. But today in 2025, that may not be the case. You may find the audience is much more educated than the person sitting up here. They may be more in touch with reality than the person sitting up here. And so what that means is historically we have outsourced our brain, our thinking, our mind to the mimbar. And so there's many other challenges that may be faced that people don't consider. You know, I'll give you an example. And I hinted on this the other night, but I'm sharing the importance of knowledge. You know, people say, West Islam, East Islam, all the same Islam. Sounds good in theory. Sounds good in theory. But does that exist for any other religion on earth, Christianity or Judaism or any other? Eastern Orthodox Christianity is very different than Western Christianity. But what I mean is by that is this. Does our environment impact us? If you think it doesn't, think again. The weather impacts us. The food impacts us. I read an interesting book that talked about the impact of your diet on you. And our book argued that not only are you what you eat, but we're finding now that you are what your grandparents ate. And your grandkids will be what you're eating now. So cut back on the halwa maybe on the... And what I'm saying is, these have big impacts. And living in 2025, I can't be someone in the day and be someone in the night. Allow me to explain. I was in Los Angeles and I was lecturing in Los Angeles in Muharram, the same way I'm lecturing here. And there were brothers who were working there who, for example, they worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, JPAL, in Cali, in LA, Greater LA. So these guys were astrophysicists, rocket scientists, right? You may have a couple at MIT. So, can you be a rocket scientist in the day and come at night at the Majlis and turn off that part of your brain? Is it like a light switch? Maybe for some it is, but for a lot of people it's not. So if you're an astrophysicist in the day, the lecture at night should also be up to your intellectual caliber. Else I'll lose you. Else we'll lose people. And we have lost people, by the way. It's interesting to see that sometimes in our communities, this is the point that I wanted to bring us back. In our own communities, we're afraid of the future of our next generations and whether people will attend, and we're somehow going through a scare of decline at the Masjid Imam Bara level. But at the global level, Shiaism is in a golden era. People in Tunisia, Morocco, Northern Africa, parts of the subcontinent, they are converting and becoming Muslim in the Arab belt in droves, Shia. What's the disattachment? What's the disconnect? Why? Because it may be that here we don't realize it, or we may realize it, but we intend to operate these facilities and these institutions in the name of Imam Hussein, Imam Ali, and Ahlul Bayt, but we don't really apply their principles. It's a bitter pill. I don't want to eat it as much as you don't want to eat it. But sometimes you need medicine. Right? A doctor comes to you, you go to the doctor, you're having some headaches, right? And you're having these headaches, and you go to the doctor, and the situation is such that the doctor's like, he's done all the brain scans, CAT scans, CT scans, all that jazz. He's done all of it, and he or she is behind the desk and sees the results. Now you, on the other hand, you're saying, it's probably just, a headache. I need some Tylenol, some Advil, and I'll be okay. Now the doctor's in another situation. The doctor has a different situation. The doctor is looking at the reports and it's clear as day that you have a tumor and you need surgery. Now the doctor could say, hey, just take some Advil, acetaminophen, or whatever, ibuprofen or whatever, and you'll be okay. Can they do that? Can the doctor do that? Is that ethical? I mean, in America at least, I don't know, other parts of the world. Not. So the doctor needs to tell the person, you need surgery and you need it fast, man. You need it fast, buddy. And to be honest, survival chances, I don't know. I can't tell you it's guaranteed. But it's worth the shot. Similarly, sometimes in our communities, we give people the Advil or the Tylenol and the sugar. When in reality, we need to be very honest. And we say, first we need a triple bypass surgery, and then we can talk about the next phase of what happens if we get there. I say this harshly, but remember, I'm in the boat just as much as you. I don't say this in any means thinking that I'm separate from this. I'm part of this. And so what I mean by that is I want us to think about this. So now, growing up, you ask someone, and I would face this, growing up listening to Majlis. You know what the dalil they used to give? The dalil for the existence of God. And we'll get to that in a couple of nights, but this. They would say, and I heard this in Majlis growing up, with ulama and maulanas that were sincere, but they were coming from a different part of the world that was different than mine. And so they would come and say, what's the dalil of Allah? And they say there was one buria, elderly lady, and she had a chakki, you know, a chakki like a mill, and she was moving the mill. And as long as she's moving the mill, you know, the mill is working. And then she stops eventually, and it stops. So they ask her, what's your proof of Allah, of Khuda? What's your proof of Khuda, of Allah? What's your proof of God? She said, it's like this chakki, like this mill. What do you mean? As long as I'm moving the chakki, it's moving. As soon as I stop, it stops. For somebody, that may be a really good dalil. But for somebody, that may be overly simplistic. And they would say, yeah, but I need more. When a question is asked in our community by a young or old person, the question has to be answered to the satisfaction of the person asking the question, not to the satisfaction of the person giving the answer. For years, we've been giving answers to the satisfaction of the person giving the answer. But if it's not given to the satisfaction of the young person or otherwise who is looking for that answer, there's a delta between the answer and the satisfactory answer. And when that is not answered, that delta, that difference, it begins to brew. You know how coffee brews and chai brews? And over time, it eventually begins to top over to the point that people say, this is a waste of time. And you know what the sad part is? There is so much depth in Islam. There is so much depth in the Quran. There is so much depth in the teaching of the Ahlul Bayt. But we somehow have not shared that. Why? So now, keeping all this point of the concept of ilm and knowledge, understanding the dynamics of what's going on in the world. Today, we need this conversation perhaps more than ever. In the AI era, what if I told you that two things can be true at once? I often give this example about what's the safest car on the road? What's the most dangerous car on the road? Cybertruck. So I often give this. Now, by the way, to be fair, from what I've been told by my friends, full self-driving is really good these days. But there was a time, especially when it came out, Teslas were the safest car on the road and the most dangerous. Safest if they worked as intended. Most dangerous if they glitched. How? How can two things be true at once? Similarly, you'll find that sometimes two things are true at once when it comes to our communities and the dynamics. Aql is very important, but ishq is also very important. Similarly, you may find that we need to meet the needs of our community in a way that they have comprehensive knowledge, that they don't compartmentalize and we don't compartmentalize and say, this is part of Islam and that is not part of Islam. I want to do away with this notion of Islamic knowledge versus non-Islamic knowledge. The fifth Imam, Imam Baqir, is on the record having said that there is not Islamic knowledge and non-Islamic. There's only one type of knowledge. You know what that is? Qurbatan ilallah, or not. Knowledge either takes you to Allah or not. That could be your biology, your chemistry, your economics, your physics, if you connect that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for the longest time, people did. And by the way, if you and I don't, who do? Who would? Don't we call ourselves followers of Babe Madinatul Ilm? Don't we call ourselves followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Saluni, saluni, qabla an tafqiduni. So if anyone should be at the forefront of knowledge, it should be us. But in the AI era, it's possible that two things are true at once. I'm coming back to that point, which is, it may be that we're coming into the most productive era in human history, possibly. But is it also possible that we as human beings may get dumber? I'll give you an example. I used to code a lot in college. Maybe some of you guys did too, right? And I remember some of these programs that we did were really complex, long, and tedious. And especially if you just want to get on with it, it's annoying because sometimes you miss a semicolon and you're stuck for days. So now you use Cursor, Claude, Anthropic's Claude, and whatever you use, you can get it to program things for you quite rapidly that are quite sophisticated, right? But I found myself doing something. I'm sharing my example, you may have other examples, but I found that sometimes when I'm getting it to code a model for me or a simulation for me or some forecast for me or some program, sometimes I just want it will give me an explanation of what needs to be done, and I'm like, no, I don't want it, just get to the end. Just give me the end result. But sometimes along the way, I found that the model, this forecasting, and it will improve over time, but sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's flat out wrong. What's that saying? Garbage in, garbage out. So sometimes it's wrong. Right now, sometimes AI is wrong, right? And I'm able to catch it because I know how sometimes this is wrong. But if my kids, your kids, a generation grows up doing the same thing, just like enter, get to the final result, they won't be able to catch the mistakes. So it may be that we are at one level going into a very sophisticated era, but it's also a very vulnerable era where we may be more prone, possibly, to be controlled by narratives. You know how this can have second order effects? Second order effects meaning, what if someone creates fake content, which is a big problem, and says, this is my reference. So the AI is telling you this is the reference. So now you come, and I come, and we have jahlul murakkab, right? Compound ignorance. We say, I have a reference for this. Baba, did you check the reference? Maulanas have done this for a long time. They say, what's the proof of this? Ye kitab mein likha. And they have like a whole stack of books at the knowing no one will read it. People always ask Maulana Sayyid, can you, and I know the question's coming, can you give me a reading list of all the books you've read? My question in my heart's always, are you going to read any of these? If you read it, I promise I'll give you every single one. I'll give you more. But if you're not, don't waste my time, don't waste your time. So, in our busy lives, we don't have time for these things. But now coming to this and bringing all of this together, ilm, knowledge. Allah's first ayah of the Quran, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. The first ayah of the Quran. Over 600 verses of the Quran have to do with tafakkur and tadabbur, reflection and contemplation as ibadah, as worship. How much do you and I contemplate and reflect? Do we take time to do that? You know how you can do it though? Take one ayah of the Quran, reflect on it, contemplate on it. Find some inspiration from it. You'll find that there's some magnificent ayat of the Quran. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We have put signs for them in the horizons and within themselves. The micro and macro. There were generations of Muslims who were looking at the world and they were saying, my religion invites me to do so, and they were coming up with discoveries. Don't you find that there's scientific names for celestial bodies and stars, but there's also common names. Many of the common names are Persian or Arab or Muslim in some sense. Because these people were reflecting. Some of the navigators during the medieval times, as they called them, were from Muslim backgrounds, Arab backgrounds, Persian backgrounds. Because when Allah says, I created the heavens and earth, and there's signs in it, we're supposed to think on these signs. Or for example, the physician, Maurice Bucaille. You know Maurice Bucaille? You don't know? Okay. So he was a physician in Europe, and he read the ayah in the Quran about embryology, about the phases of the creation of the human, of the embryo and the zygote and all those different phases, and the flesh and the bones. He said, when was this written? He said, 1400 years ago. So where? He said, in the middle of Arabian desert. He said, what? He said, we didn't know this stuff then. He became a Muslim. I'm not saying that should be any dalil for someone, but for somebody, it was clear as day that there's something here. So what I'm saying is, how much are you and I contemplating? Sometimes we don't realize that our goals of becoming a doctor, lawyer, engineer, physician, economist, whatever it is, I said doctor twice, whatever it is, can be and should be part of Islam. Excellence. Kamal. That's going to be a theme that I'm harping on. Kamal is what we should pursue. The Ahlul Bayt were insane kamil. the perfect, complete human beings. Our journey is much like the founding fathers of this country said: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We should be in life, liberty, and the pursuit of excellence. Excellence is not just the excellence that is imposed on us by society. Excellence is also being a humanitarian. Excellence is also being a good person. Excellence is also being a kind person. Excellence is also a person who is aware of the world around them. Excellence has many dimensions. So now, when we look at that, you may find there's a lot of depth therein. Where do these things come from? I want us to reinvigorate that concept of what it means to be a believer and what it means to be on the path of God. And what's amazing about it is, the more we contemplate, the closer we get to Allah. You know, if God wanted us to, if He wanted to hide truth from us, as an example, forgive my language, but if He wanted to hide, He would not tell us to go get knowledge, right? Because knowledge illuminates things. Knowledge makes things open. Knowledge makes things clear. You know who doesn't want people to get educated? Politicians. They don't want people to get educated. The founding fathers had a very different, concept. Today we're getting rid of the Department of Education and a lot of these things. The founding fathers had a different view. Jefferson is on the record saying that if a nation wants to be ignorant and free, if a nation thinks that it can be ignorant and free, it thinks of that which never has been nor will be. It's not possible to be free and ignorant. That's also a form of jahl that leads to shackles. So Allah wanted to free us, emancipate us by understanding this, by understanding knowledge, by understanding these things. Where did these things come from? There was a whole generation of people that were inspired by knowledge because the Quran inspired them. The Ahlul Bayt inspired them. So now, where do these things come from? Do you know where X comes from? X in math, you ever done algebra? 2x equals 6. Divide both sides by 2, x equals 3. Where does X come from? Does anyone know the first book written on algebra that we have documented? It's called Kitab al-Jabr wal-Muqabil by Muhammad al-Khawarizmi. It was written in the 8th century in Baghdad, they say. And he wrote this book, al-Khawarizmi, and in that book, they didn't have equations like we have today. They had paragraphs. So when it was going to be translated from Arabic to other languages, you had a situation where it said 2 times a thing equals 6 in Arabic in a sentence, in a paragraph. That was the form of it. It was an applied mathematics book for business. And so when this book was first translated, it was translated into Greek. And so when they were translating from Arabic to Greek, the translators were saying, well, it says 2 times a thing is equal to 6 in Arabic. 2 times a thing, what's the word for thing in Arabic? Shay. 2 times a shay is equal to 6. We don't have the word shay in Arabic or in Greek from Arabic. We don't have it. We don't have shay in Greek. What do we use? So they said the closest thing that we have in our alphabet is chi. You know, chi squared statistics. So then after Greek, it was translated into from Arabic to Greek, Greek to Latin. And in Latin, they said, well, we don't have chi in Latin, but a chi kind of looks like an X. So we can use that. So if you're not feeling like doing your math homework, you can blame your Khawarizmi for that. Having said that, it may help you. You may never know. God bless, may Allah protect and bless my parents. They encouraged me to do math when I didn't want to do my math, and I thank them now because it allowed me to be very lazy through college because I could just solve a couple of equations and not memorize anything. So you never know when it may come in handy. Anyways, that's where that comes from. Where does, you know what our world runs on? What does our world run on? Google. Let's see if it survives. It may. It probably will. My brother-in-law works at Google, so I'm hoping for his sake and for relations that it does survive. Otherwise, there may be other companies. Having said that, what does it run on? What does Google run on? What does OpenAI run on? What are all these things? What's running in the background? So what? Someone said that, I think. An algorithm. Algorithm is what? Algorithm is an exact Latinization of Khawarizmi. Khawarizmi in Latin is algoros. Algoros became algorithm. Did you think about that? I want you to know some names. Another name is a name that you should know is a man by the name of Avicenna or Ibn Sina, who I think has been neglected, and now the Western world is saying, how do we neglect this guy? His book, he was a physician, he was a hafiz of the Quran, he was a mufassir of the Quran, a commentator on the Quran, and he had a tremendous depth of knowledge. And his book, Al-Qanun fi Tib, or the Canon of Medicine, was used as a textbook east and west up until the 18th century, the 1700s. What? Or, I never want you, he was a Ismaili Shia, they say. But there's another person I want you to never forget, who I think is in our schools is very neglected. And he was an Isnashari Imami Shia by the name of Khwaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi, who I think we've done a really injustice to in terms of we don't even discuss the guy, the scholar. He was arguably one of the greatest ulama, alims, of scholars of his time, and arguably the greatest scientist of his time. You know Copernicus's model of the universe? It's not complete without something called the Tusi couple. And the only difference that you find between the Tusi couple and Copernicus's model in the diagrams is one says A, B, and C, or Latin letters, and the other one says Alif, Ba, Ta. The only difference, however, is Tusi was way before Copernicus in time-wise. And they say that even historians today say that the diagrams are so identical, it's almost impossible that the Copernicus had not read what had been written by Tusi. But Tusi was a great scholar and an alim. Sometimes these things pay dividends. I'll give you an example, dividends. Allama Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan. He's a great scholar. He spent years of his life dedicated to the Quran. He said, you know, when I got to Najaf to study, I was praying that I find a teacher or a mentor who can guide me. And he said, I wasn't finding it. And eventually, I was able to find someone. How? He said, I was struggling in the early days of my knowledge, like in learning. So he did a dua to Allah by tawassul of the Ahlul Bayt. Now, tawassul is a long conversation. Let's not get into it. But if you read the Quran, God uses it everywhere. God uses it when he tells Musa, his Ulul Azm prophet, go and find someone who knows more than you. And he goes finds Khidr in Surah Kahf that I recited at the beginning of this series. The ayat that Imam Hussein recited from the spear. Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi wal-raqim kanu min ayatina ajaba. So Allah said there are people that you need to learn from. Allah says in the Quran, he talks to a little bird, a little hudhud bird. Sulaiman talks to a little hudhud bird. And Sulaiman says, what took you so long? Why weren't you in line when I was taking roll call for everyone? And he says, I'm bringing you knowledge that you're not aware of. I flew over the people of the Queen of Sheba in the Quran, right? So even if Sulaiman didn't know something, the bird is telling Sulaiman, a prophet of Allah, something that he doesn't know. Allah says in the Quran, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above every knower is someone who knows more. And so, Allama Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai, he did a tawassul to Allah, and he said, Ya Allah, I'm struggling. And he did a 2 rakah prayer to Allah and gifted the sawab, the ajr, the reward to Imam Ali alayhi salam, the shrine of Amir al-Mu'minin. And by the way, you'll find many scholars who said that they were able to unlock big problems by the tawassul of the Ahlul Bayt because God has given them insights by His virtue. All knowledge is ultimately from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now, at that junction, when this dua was accepted, he said, I was able to flourish in a way I was never able to flourish before. So what happened? He says, and I'm drawing to a conclusion. I know it's a weeknight. I'm going to give the take-home message here now. So he said, go. His mentor was Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai. Tabatabai's mentor was his distant relative, Allama Qadhi Tabatabai. Allama Qadhi was the teacher of many other scholars, such as Ayatullah Bahjat and many others. Anyways, he said, I want you to learn Quran and fiqh and all of these subjects, but he said, I want you to study another subject. As his mentor is telling him, I want you to study Riyaziyat, mathematics. What? Why study math? What does that have to do with the Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, the understanding of Islam? What if I told you that you couldn't really understand God without mathematics? I read a very interesting book. It was called Is God a Mathematician? And one of the most difficult things for people to answer about God and the existence of God, which we'll come to in a couple of nights, is how is this world so calculated in so many ways? I'm not saying that's guaranteed, but probabilistically it's an interesting question to ask. The most difficult answer, the question for people to ask or answer for atheists, is the question of the fine-tuning argument of the world, about why are there such calculated aspects of the world. Anyways. So Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai says, okay, why am I going to do math? But he said, I wanted the best. This is where ihsan comes in. You can get the run-of-the-mill professor, or you can get the top professor. And he said, I wanted the top professor. So I got to the top professor and I found out he had only 1 hour to teach me, and that was in the summertime in Najaf, right by Zuhrain prayers. And he said, before and after, nobody would want to touch that slot because you would be sweating bullets. And he said it was a mile or two away walk. He said, but you know, mujtahid comes from ijtihad, comes from juhad. Juhad means struggle. Nothing worthwhile comes without struggle. What was that line that poet Faraz said about Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Ishq ki raah mein jo koh-e garan aata hai, ishq ki raah mein jo koh-e garan aata hai, harf-e taza ki tarah qissa-e pari na kahun, kal ki taarikh ko main aaj ka aina kahun, और इश्क की राह में जो कोहे गरां आता है, लोग दीवार कहें, मैं तो इसे जीना कहूं. He said that iron mountain that comes on the path of divine love of Allah, you think it's an obstacle. I see it as a staircase to the divine, a ladder case to the divine. And so sometimes the struggle is what is making you for something much bigger. Do you become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an entrepreneur without struggle? If you do, you still won't value it, even in your deep depth of your heart. If you cut corners, you yourself will feel that something's wrong, if you're honest with yourself. So similarly, at that junction, he started studying. He said, I found the best teacher, and he told me that this is the only slot I have. It was like a wild goose chase. You know, wild goose chase? You tell someone, hey, finish the majlis in 20 minutes. And so it's not feasible, not possible, all of these things. So anyways, he said, no, I'm dedicated and I'm committed to knowledge, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So he said he used to walk for 2 miles in the middle of the heat of Najaf to get this knowledge. And he said, I used to feel bad because I used to be perspiring so much. And I used to wash myself off in a little faucet in a fountain so I didn't smell in front of my teacher. This is what he said. But I dedicated myself. When did that pay dividends? He dedicated himself. Eventually, do you know when that paid dividends? Years later, Allama Tabatbai, he leaves Najaf. He goes back to Tabriz, where he was from. From Tabriz, he eventually ends up in Qom. In Qom, there was a project. You know what the project was in Qom? They needed to expand one of the seminaries, the Hujjatiyah seminary. You know how there's universities and colleges, one of the buildings needed to be expanded. So they did a RFQ, like RFP, like a request for proposal, right? They said, let's get blueprints from architects, civil engineers, and who's gonna bid and say, let's pick one. So Allama Hujjati, or the leader of that college, said he looked at blueprint, draft after draft after draft, blueprint after blueprint. By the way, for those of you who studied architecture, my grandfather used to tell me these things. He was an architect. There's a philosophy behind architecture, right? There's a philosophy of serenity, of peace, of symmetry, of the environment. Does it make you feel more comfortable, or does it make you feel more, different things? We're finding today that the level of ideas that you generate, the size of the roof above your head has an impact on how big your ideas are. How generous Allah is, He gave us the sky as the ultimate roof. Just step outside and think. Step outside and imagine and look at the stars. There's no limitation. At that junction, he was saying no to all of these. There were different people from Germany, from Iran, from Tehran who were sending all of these different blueprints, all of them. Allama Hujjati said, they don't realize how our students live their lives. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand this may be very modern, but it doesn't understand the concept of wudu, how we sit and eat, all the things that go with Islamic culture and civilization. Until one day, he got a blueprint. He said, this is it. This is the one. He said, this architect who drafted this, or engineer, or whoever it was, they know the best of the East and the West. They know Islamic philosophy and modern technology and sciences. But then the students were all curious. All of the ones from the top cities around the world in Tehran were rejected. Whose blueprint was this that was accepted? And so they bugged their teacher and they asked him, what is it? Who was it? He said, somebody is it. He said, tell us. He said, there's some Sayyid who lives in this block in Qom. Go to his house. It's there over here. So they ended up going there and they went down that alleyway and they got to that house in that door. They knocked on it and they knocked on it. They said, Salamu alaikum. The door opened, wa alaikum assalam. And behind the door was Allama Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai. Those insights in other subjects such as philosophy, mathematics, and many other subjects that he studied were able to pay dividends down the road. Similarly, this is about a building. But remember, there's physical infrastructure and there's spiritual infrastructure. And spiritual infrastructure may be more important than physical infrastructure. Our communities across America, Europe, and Toronto, and you go there, everyone's focused on build big buildings. Good intent. But that doesn't mean that's necessary, but not sufficient. Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, in consulting they talk about that. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Necessary. You need to be 35 right now to be the president of the United States, right? Necessary condition at the moment. Who knows about if laws matter at all in America anymore, but that's what they have. But just because you're 35 doesn't mean you'll automatically be president. Alhamdulillah. But I don't know sometimes. Nowadays, it seems like you have to be 95 to be president in America. And you have to start tripping. That's the necessity as well. But that's not what it's meant to be. So, necessary is that you need to have these marakis, these centers, these institutions. But if you don't give people spiritual infrastructure, they'll be empty. There won't be anybody here. And I'll give you proof of this in the next few nights. So now, we need a new generation that realizes that their goals in life and their knowledge pursuit is part of Iman. When you open your biology, your chemistry, your physics, your robotics, your AI, your quantum computing books, I want you to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I want you to think that this is ibadah to Allah. And make your niyyah that I'm doing this for the betterment of my society, for humanity. There will be a time that if people got true Islam as taught by the Ahlul Bayt, believe me, there will be more non-Muslims here than Muslims. That's how universal the principles are. These aren't my words. These are my friends who reverted or converted from other religions to Islam. Said, if only people knew. How many others have said, Syrian Christians, Hindus from India, they've said, if we had Hussein, do you know what we would do to the world? In terms of we turn the world over. That's how powerful the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is. It's a miracle. So now, bridging that, pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of excellence. In Najaf, we had the opportunity to meet some of the top scholars there. Do you know, we asked them as Western young speakers, what is it that we should be known for as Shias and followers of Ahlul Bayt in the West? They said, by the way, hats off to them. They're a lot more broad-minded than we are sometimes. They said, well, you should be asking your scholarship, who knows the lay of the land, and your community's experts, what that should be your identity. That's very broad-minded. That's very, that's really open-minded. But they said, number one, if you want some examples from the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, two things, justice and knowledge. Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt were always known to be people of justice and people of knowledge. Pursue that in your life. And that's the most valuable thing. So today, I want you to exhaust knowledge. Learn as much as possible. Become as valuable as possible. But one thing that you'll notice is a theme in this conversation is we build up things and we break them down. So I built this up and I'm breaking it down. Remember that aql is very important. Aql is vital. But aql charagh rah hai, manzil nahi. It is the lantern of the path. It's not the end goal. It's not the destination. The destination is something deeper. The tool is intellect. The tool is mantiq. The tool is learning, wisdom. But we need more tools in our toolkit. The take-home message tonight is, don't live two lives. Don't think that only namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, khums is ibadah. Ibadat is seeking a halal rizq. You know how many, that will be tomorrow. Do you know how many merits there are of earning for your loved ones and your family? Do you know how many merits there are of contemplating? Do you know how many merits are there? Islam is really a complete way of life, but we have only shown one fraction of that. Nonetheless, we turn our hearts and our minds to the plains of Karbala. Tonight is a night where we commemorate two individuals of magnanimous inspiration. These individuals are brave beyond any understanding. They are people who come from strong bloodlines, courageous, valiant, that if they wanted, they could turn things upside down. But they had a mission and a goal. And so what happened was these two individuals by the names of Aun and Muhammad are the sons of Bibi Zainab. They're the nephews of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They come on the day of Ashura and they try to get permission from Imam Hussein to go towards the battlefield. Imam Hussein is reluctant. He loves these children. So he says, your father's not here. You need to seek permission from your father. And then eventually they go back to the tents and their mother, it's as if their mother Zainab salamullahi alayha, Bibi Zainab is saying, why are you still here? Why haven't you gone to sacrifice yourself? And they're saying, our mother, we want to. We've asked our uncle. But every time he says that you are your father's responsibility and your father's trust, you must ask him. And then Bibi Zainab takes these two children and she says, my brother, my husband, Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, he sent these two with the very intent to serve you and sacrifice themselves for this mission. Eventually, there's a moment where the brother and sister, they discuss. Finally, Imam Hussein gives permission for these two young boys to go towards the battlefield by the name of Aun and Muhammad. These two depart for the maqtal, they depart for the battlefield. And when they depart for the battlefield, ajrukum ala Allah, you may hear that at times there are words that I may say in English. There are times where I may say words in Urdu. Forgive me. There's something that's said. It's called emotional resonance. In our universities that's studied, there are some languages that are higher on the emotional resonance scale. Urdu happens to be one of those. There's a feeling that is there that you're able to connect with. Ask those who are your elders and others who may know, and you may be able to connect, because one of the things that we are told is connect yourselves to the tragedy of Imam Hussein, because there's an elixir in it. Nonetheless, these two boys depart for the battlefield. When they depart for the battlefield, they begin to fight. When they fight, the enemy is perplexed. They say these seem like young boys, but they are destroying the enemy. Who are they? They say that these are the children and the grandchildren of Ja'far al-Tayyar. These are the grandchildren of Karar. These are the grandchildren of Ali al-Murtada and Ja'far al-Tayyar. They are courageous. You won't be able to stop them like this. They need to, what should we do? They said, ambush them, surround them. They surround them, they ambush them, they strike them. Eventually a moment comes where they strike and they ambush and encircle the brothers. And they strike, and as they strike, the brothers call out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya Ummah. Oh, salams our uncle upon you. Oh, salams Aba Abdullah upon you. They fell towards the ground. Imam Hussein runs like a lion towards these children, his nephews. When he runs towards them, the narration say he gets to one of the brothers, and then when he gets to one of them, he says, the brother says to him, my uncle, between Aun and Muhammad, he says, my uncle, as I was falling, I heard my brother call out, go to him first, go to my brother first. Imam Hussein, go brother. And what does he find? That at that junction, he comes there, he's in his final breath. He says that my uncle, I want you to go to my brother. He fell as he was calling out. He says that I am just coming from him. I just came from your brother. He told me to come to you. He says, go back to him. It's as if Imam Imam Hussein is going between brother to brother to the point that they both depart from this world. Ajrukum ala Allah. The narrations say that when Aun and Muhammad, the two stars of the heart of Zainab, they are departed and they leave this world and they're shuhada, Imam Hussein brings the two bodies into the khaymaga, into the tents. And when he brings the two bodies, the narrations say that whenever a shaheed would come into from Ahlul Bayt, from Ali Muhammad, from Banu Hashim, would come and their body was brought into the tents, the women would weep and they would mourn for this loved one. The narrations say when Imam Hussein entered into the tent, he brought the bodies of Aun and Muhammad, expecting, like every other mother, that they will come, the mother will come and mourn. What does Imam Hussein see? He sees his sister Zainab in the sajda of shukr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She is not weeping. Imam Hussein realizes that Zainab is not even looking towards her sons. He realizes that his sister is keeping him in mind. She doesn't want his heart to break. At that point, the narrations say when Imam Hussein saw that his sister Zainab is not crying for her own sons, the narrations say Imam Hussein fell onto the bodies of Aun and Muhammad and he began to cry like a mother cries for their child. He began to cry like a mother cries for their child. Ajrukum ala Allah. These were the two children. Ajrukum ala Allah, final moments. They say Zainab salamullahi alayha, Bibi Zainab, Ulya Maqam. She didn't cry for her sons Aun and Muhammad in Karbala. They say they went on after Karbala to Kufa and Sham. She never cried for Aun and Muhammad. They were released. When they were released from the dungeons of Sham, they went back and they had a majlis in Sham itself before they went to Karbala. Bibi Zainab said, I won't leave till I have a majlis for my brother Hussein ibn Ali. In that first majlis, they say the looted property of the Ahlul Bayt was given back. Amongst them, the heads of the shuhada were given back. They say the head of Ali Akbar came. Layla took the head. They say the head of Qasim came. Farwa took the head. They say the head of Ali Asghar came. A mother took that head, Rabab, into her lap. But they say there were two heads that were in the corner. A lady remarked, and she said, it seems these two stars, these two moons, does not have someone to mourn them. Zainab said, as she took the head of Abbas and Imam Hussein in her hands, she said, don't say that. Those are my sons, Aun and Muhammad. But who is there to cry for Hussein? Who is there to cry for the son of Fatima al-Zahra? Ajrukum ala Allah. They departed. Zainab didn't cry. They went to Karbala for the Arba'in. Zainab didn't cry. They got back to Medina. Zainab didn't go home. She went and she stayed in the home of Imam Sajjad. The narrations say that one day Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, I'm concluding here, Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar came and he said to Imam Sajjad, he said, O Sayyid al-Sajideen, O Zainul Abidin, O Sajjad, your aunt Zainab has not been home ever since she came back to Medina. Tell her to come home. Tell her to come back to her home. Imam Sajjad, he comes to his dear aunt and says, my aunt Zainab, go home. You have not been home. Ajrukum ala Allah. Azadaro do jumle maine khatam kiya. Zainab uthi. Badi Hashim का मोहल्ला था. ज़ैनब अपने घर की जानिब बढ़ी. अपना मोहल्ला नजर आया, दरो दीवार नजर आए. ज़ैनब ने दरवाजा देखा, दरवाजा खोला घर का. ज़ैनब ने क्या देखा? ज़ैनब ने तो बिस्तर देखे, तो मुसल्ले नजर आए. ज़ैनब ने पट गई. कौन? मोहम्मद मेरे लख्ते जगह. सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या अमीर المؤمنين, सल्लल्लाहु अलैकी या फातिमा الزهرا سيدة النساء العالمين, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या हसन المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. ماتم حسين حسين حسين.
Ya Hussein.
تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولاؤں، میں خواب میں اصغر تجھے، میں خواب میں اصغر تجھے لوری بھی سناؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، لوٹاؤ سفر سے کہ بڑی دیر ہوئی ہے، لوٹاؤ سفر سے کہ بڑی دیر ہوئی ہے، بیتاب ہوں کب سے مجھے، بیتاب ہوں کب سے مجھے سینے سے لگاؤ، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، کوئی مجھے بتلاتا نہیں تیری نشانی، کوئی مجھے بتلاتا نہیں تیری نشانی، بڑے ساتھ میں تیروں کی، بڑے ساتھ میں تیروں کی کہاں ڈھونڈنے جاؤ، تجھے جھولا تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں، سوچا تھا تیری سالگرہ گر میں کروں گی، سوچا تھا تیری سالگرہ گر میں کروں گی، تقدیر یہ کہتی ہے، تقدیر یہ کہتی ہے تیرا سو کے مناؤ، تجھے جھولا جھلاؤں میں تجھے
جھولا. Ayan. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
میرا نانا نبی، میری ماں سیدہ، میرا بابا علی، میرا بھائی حسن، ہم ہی ہیں پنجتن، ہم ہی ہیں پنجتن، میری کیا ہے خطا، میری کیا ہے خطا، میری کیا ہے خطا، میری کیا ہے خطا، مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ کیا میں زہرا کا جایا نہیں ہوں؟ کیا میں زہرا کا جایا نہیں ہوں؟ کیا نبی کا نواسا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ میرے نانا نے کلمہ سکھایا اور قرآن تم کو سنایا، میرے نانا نے کلمہ سکھایا اور قرآن تم کو سنایا۔ کیا میں نانا کا سایہ نہیں ہوں؟ کیا میں نانا کا سایہ نہیں ہوں؟ کیا نبی کا نواسا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھے کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ چکیا پیس کر ماں نے پالا، مجھ کو نانا نے جھولا جھلایا، چکیاں پیس کر ماں نے پالا، مجھ کو نانا نے جھولا جھلایا۔ اپنا بچپن میں بھولا نہیں ہوں، اپنا بچپن میں بھولا نہیں ہوں، کیا نبی کا نواسا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ میں جو پانی کبھی مانگتا تھا، کیوں تڑپتی تھی ماں اب میں سمجھا، میں جو پانی کبھی مانگتا تھا، کیوں تڑپتی تھی ماں اب میں سمجھا۔ پاس اصغر کے جاتا نہیں ہوں، پاس اصغر کے جاتا نہیں ہوں، کیا نبی کا نواسا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ کہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو پانی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟ مجھ پہ کیوں بند کرتے ہو نی، کیا محمد کا پیارا نہیں ہوں؟
یا حسین،
شہید کربلا حسین، اسیر اشکیا حسین، بے جرم بے خطا حسین، بنا لا الہ حسین، علی کا لاڈلا حسین، تیرا سر کٹیا میرا گھر لٹیا، تیرا سر کٹیا میرا گھر لٹیا، دوویں اجر یا بین برا حسین، وچ جنت دے کلہوراں نال، وچ جنت دے کلہوراں نال، تینوں رونڈی اے ماں زہرا حسین، شہید کربلا حسین، اسیر اشقیا حسین، بے جرم بے خطا حسین، بنا لا الہ حسین، علی کا لاڈلا حسین، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد۔ توجہ زیارت۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا تسد المعصومين من ذرية الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك الشمس الشموس ونيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بأرض طوس الراضي بالقدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأس والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وزهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها تويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.